Hi.
Hi. Hi. Hello.
Good
Sorry for the
morning.
good morning. So let's wait 1 second there. All the other people join us. So Susan, thanks a lot for accepting our invitation. I'm very glad to have you speaking at our event.
Well, thanks for having me. And sorry, I was so hard to pin down. I've been bombarded, just absolutely busy beyond belief. I'm running a center now. Oh God. I don't know why I started that. And then I have a book due. And then I have 3 kids. So it's a mess. Yeah.
Oh. Well, I have only one, and yeah, it's it's a mess.
Yeah.
One center and 1 kid.
Yeah. How old are they?
2 of them are teenagers and one's 21. I just sent her to Chile. She's on an airplane right now to Santiago.
Oh.
Yeah. Nothing like teenagers.
All right, so let's see, are we all here? So let me see. Alwe, are there other people waiting?
Yes, but I just admit all people, so there's no one waiting outside.
You just let everyone in.
Yes, I'll do that.
Thanks. All right, so let me see. You had so many titles and appointments.
Whatever, just ignore that.
No.
Keep it short.
Okay. All right. So maybe Aloy, can we start the record? You okay? We're recording this. We are planning on then.
That's fine.
Okay. Cool.
And I have to apologize if you hear dog barking in the background.
Well, it's all right. Okay, so it is my great pleasure. Oh, before I start, do we want to test whether you have a PowerPoint? You want to share something? Maybe we can test now if all works fine.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
It says you disabled screen sharing, so it's not letting me share my screen.
So Alva, can you please share the screen? Is it working now? Okay, now you are co-host. So
yes, you may try it now.
Okay. Share screen. Okay. Can you all see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so it is my great pleasure to introduce you to our speaker, who is Professor Susan Schneider. She is, as you can see, NASA Bloomberg Chair, Library of Congress and NASA, Director of the Center for the Future of Mind at the Florida Atlantic University, and also Dietrich Chair at the Florida Atlantic University. Today, the title of her talk is The Global Brain Argument. Susan, the floor is yours.
Oh, okay. So how long do I have? Like 40 minutes?
45 to 1 hour.
Okay.
45 to 1 hour. And then,
we should have questions.
Yes. And then at some point we will have, when you stop whenever you want from 45 minutes, after 45 minutes.
I'll keep it short. Like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I'll give us a chance to do, comments. And then, okay, so let me just kind of lay things out. And I have to say, I'm kind of going to move quick and I'm canvassing a lot of stuff. So it's, you can always kind of ask for more detail later. I don't mean to move quickly over important issues, but I want to lay everything out. So I'm providing what I call the global brain argument. And And basically, it draws from scenarios about the future of AI that are currently envisioned by many. For example, widespread technological unemployment, powerful multinational tech companies, or governments with advanced cloud-based AI at their disposal, the widespread use of wearable AI devices and brain-machine interfaces. And the argument basically says, if some of these scenarios obtain, we could be faced with the future in which we're part of a global brain network. So this is a somewhat new talk. Okay, so gosh, I can't read this. Let's see, let me just kind of shrink this up. Okay, good. So here's a passage. This is part of a book that's coming out with Norton, a trade book. And here's a passage from the introduction, which kind of encapsulates the idea of the paper. So I write, here's an idea I find horrible, yet hard to resist. We are already part of a computronium, the internet, a massive network that utilizes matter and energy throughout the globe for its computations. We are the sensory transducers delivering inputs into scores of machine learning systems. In the context of deep learning systems, in particular, the data itself shapes the algorithm. Today's algorithms are but a disunified hodgepodge of fairly unintegrated programs. But over time, the disunified labyrinth of code could integrate in order to facilitate faster, higher bandwidth information transfer and communication between devices in the Internet of Things. Perhaps a single, highly integrated system will emerge and become super intelligent, outperforming humans in every intellectual respect. The Internet computronium is created by us, and it depends on us. Its shape is determined by market forces and Internet regulations that could foster human flourishing or fail entirely, leaving us in a cyberpunk dystopia like the Borg of Star Trek. Okay, so as usual, I'm being very cynical. Here's the argument. So I'll just let you look over this. It starts with what I call the hyperintelligence premise. I'm going to be walking through all of these premises. That premise says AI continues to get smarter, and eventually there are hyperintelligent AIs being either savant or superintelligent systems. I'll explain that shortly. Premise 2 offers what I call the global brain thesis. It says that one or more savant or superintelligent systems has an extensive cloud presence. It includes or cooperates with leading apps and search engines. Premise 3 is the nodes premise. It says people become nodes in the system by wiring into the cloud hyperintelligence. Premise 4 suggests that if 1 through 3 obtain, these wired in humans will become part of a global brain. Premise 5 asserts that they obtain. And the conclusion is that wired in humans become part of a global brain. Now, obviously, one wonders what the ethical and metaphysical significance of that is, and I hope to get to that after I lay out the argument. Okay, so let's go to premise 1. So premise 1 is the hyperintelligence premise. Now, I need to explain the terminology here. So the premise says that humans, that AI continues to progress, and eventually there are these hyperintelligent AI systems. These are systems that are by definition either what I call savant systems or superintelligent systems. So I'm sure that you're all aware of superintelligence at your institute, but I just want to mention that when I'm talking about a superintelligent system, I mean a system that's smarter than humans in every respect by definition. So that's sort of the definition that was utilized, for instance, in Nick Bostrom's book, Superintelligence. Now, I think that definition, it's fine as long as people understand that that's what a superintelligent system is. The usual case for superintelligence, as you know, is that there's a sort of point at which humans, at least some human researchers, reach artificial general intelligence, where artificial general intelligence is understood as being an intelligence that is least functionally isomorphic to humans, can do all the things that we can do just as well. Now, I'm not sure I believe that story of progression that, there will first be this AGI moment, and then there will be from there shortly thereafter a superintelligent system. You know, the problem with that is that if you look at AI systems right now, you'll notice that these systems are more like savant systems. They're better than us in all sorts of ways, right? And they're dumb in other ways. And so, you know, why think that there'll be anything like a system that's functionally isomorphic to us? I mean, for one thing, it will surely have better calculating abilities. It will surely be better at, all sorts of things that deep learning systems today are good at. It will be better at playing Go. I mean, it'd probably be better at driving by the time an AGI or, these kinds of impressive general purpose systems come along. So, I mean, I think what we need to do is like move away from this obsession with AGI and actually look at general intelligence, which is, a broader class of entities. I mean, dogs, cats, frogs, they have general purpose capacities that can go from one sensory divide to the next. I mean, they have sensory integration areas. They have working memory that combines, ideas from different topics and so on. We're already getting AIs that are general purpose. I mean, I would argue that an early general purpose general purpose AI, not an AGI, is something like GPT-3 and further iterations of GPT-3, because it can move from one topic divide and in a sense, sort of integrate sensory material as well. So, but what if we do, so run with me on this idea that AIs will, as they move in a more general direction, be more impressive than us in some ways, but they'll also have deficits. They'll also be, ridiculously dumb in all kinds of ways. So, I mean, that's why I call them savant systems. Now, what's theoretically interesting about a savant system? It's that if you look at the control problem, if you think about like the kind of issues that Bostrom scared the crap out of a lot of us, and people that came before him were writing papers on this for a long time. It was all about, the control problem, the paperclip factory, all of that stuff. But if you think about it, a super intelligent system isn't so idiotic that it's going to have the mind of a sociopath, or that it's going to make like crazy inferences about, how to achieve goals. It would probably be a savant system that would be capable of just momentous errors that exterminate humanity accidentally and whatnot. And notice that savant systems would come earlier, right? I mean, we're kind of there where we have impressive savant systems, especially if you consider that we don't even know about all the really good systems. The really good systems are systems that are 10 years ahead of what we have right now and, that certain defense departments have. So, the control problem is here. It doesn't need to wait for superintelligence. It does not need to wait for AGI. So that's why I define a category that I call hyperintelligent systems for the purpose of this argument, and focus, instead of fixating on superintelligence, which leads everybody to sit there and debate Terminator scenarios and all this stuff. Think about what we have today and what we may have in the very near future, this class of general intelligences, not AGIs, unless you expand the notion of an AGI, to include things like a mouse. To me, a general intelligence is anything that has that multimodal capacity. Anyway, then we get to the hyperintelligence premise. And so here's what it asserts. It asserts that AI continues to get smarter. And eventually there are these hyperintelligent systems that are either savant or superintelligent systems. Okay, so P1 kicks in pretty quickly, I think. I mean, we don't need to wait for superintelligence. So I don't think the premise is that unreasonable. Okay, so let's turn to the next premise in the argument. This is just a sketch of what savant systems are. I already said that. Okay, now we get to what I call the global brain premise. So this says that one or more hyperintelligent systems has an extensive cloud presence. and it includes or cooperates with leading apps and search engines. Okay. So the idea here, is that these hyper-intelligent systems have an extensive presence on the internet. We may not have access to them. We may not know they're there, but they're there. And they get more and more powerful over time. Now, by a global brain, here's what I mean. I have in mind an AI superpower. I don't mean that there would be only one, but I mean something like a Google global brain, or something that a defense department or a dictatorship, or I'm trying to think of all the possible scenarios, DeepMind, operates, not necessarily for nefarious reasons. It could be, part of the surveillance capitalist system, but there could be more than one, right? But the important part here is that we become the sensors of these systems and we don't know it. And that's kind of interesting from the perspective of catastrophic and existential risk. And it's also kind of interesting from the perspective of the metaphysics of mind, and of course, ethics as well. So let me try to move in more into this idea, but the idea is that we become nodes of these systems. Okay, so so more generally, the ingredients for this kind of scenario are the following. Market forces pushing for smarter AIs, including ever more expansive search engines, facial recognition systems, personal assistants, autonomous vehicles, etc. An increasingly efficient and integrated inventory of Internet of Things items in homes and businesses that actually talk to each other. So, the problem right now is that everybody's got their proprietary IoT systems, and those kinds of systems don't talk to something that's a different brand and whatnot. But over time, I think things will get more seamless. Internet will get faster and more accessible. And there'll be more and more humans who utilize metaverse services for work and play. And I don't just mean metaverse in the Facebook sense, but I mean more broadly speaking, there'll be platforms in which people, have these Zoom sessions, for example, in virtual reality, or game in virtual reality. And that internet use, use of virtual reality becomes incredibly seamless. But it also means that people will become dependent on it and need to be hooked into what I call the global brain. There'll also be more and more unified sensors that track biological weapons, pandemic risks, environmental hazards, cybersecurity risks, and so on, that are used in a world state center program, for example. It's no secret that DARPA has had programs like this. For example, one or more global tech giants or governments that own the engines and have great political power. And then, of course, the usual computational speed and efficiency increasing, costs dropping, and so on. Okay, so that being said, there's an older global brain hypothesis that some of you may have heard of, and I just want to distinguish my own view from that view. It dates back to the days in which people actually thought the internet was going to be some sort of a utopia. Back in 1983, there's actually a Global Brain Institute run by someone with the last name of Highlighton, interesting person. Lots of interesting books. I had fun reading them, about 6 months ago. So it tends to be real utopian, not anticipating the ills of social media, cyber wars, the control problem, and so on. And the same individuals now are like, oh, okay. Let's see. It had 3 basic claims. So first, it said that the internet will increasingly link its users into a single information processing system that functions roughly like a collective self-aware nervous system at a planetary scale. I'm not committed to that. First of all, let me say, I'm not saying that the entire internet would be something like a singular unified intelligence system. Okay. Second of all, I'm not committed to the idea that AI will have feelings, consciousness, or self-awareness. If you've read my book, you can see that I take a wait and see approach. I think, it's conceptually possible that AI could be conscious, but there's no reason to think that we'll be smart enough to build it or that we'll want to build it. I mean, why would tech companies want to do that? If they can get an AGI or something like it, that is nothing like us and is cheaper to build than something that actually mimics the human mind. Okay, so furthermore, it's not clear how far to push the analogy with the nervous system as the older global brain hypothesis did. Their proponents point out like rough analogies like, oh, web browser search engines are like a basic prefrontal cortex, and they're like buttons that are like a primitive amygdala. Further, web pages are said to play a role similar to neurons and are connected by hyperlinks, playing a role, like synaptic connections, forming a kind of associative network. Well, I mean, loosely, there's an analogy, but I think, the really interesting thing would be to actually look at the mathematics, look at the properties of a global brain network. And I can talk about that later. For example, well, maybe I'll just say now, just real quick. So for example, if you look at the connectomics, the kind of work that Olaf Sporns and others was doing, you could maybe try to see if a global brain, a suspected global brain, say you identified something like that on the internet. I mean, it'd be hard to do because I think it would probably be undercover. But I mean, you might test it for phi, in tandem with like Tononi's people. Well, of course, phi's intractable in any interesting case, but maybe in the future. Or, more interestingly, you might look for small world networks, sort of hub structures, sort of properties that information processing in the brain needs to follow that you also see in other complex systems. So, I'm lucky because I now have graduate students in a complex systems PhD program. So they're like the kind of people who could actually, actually put this project into play one day if we found like an interesting case of something that looked like it might be an early superintelligence or a savant system. But again, it'd be a lot easier to do this project in tandem, like in a classified way. But who wants to do classified research can't talk about it. Okay, so let's see. There are other claims that the older global brain hypothesis offered. So, I agree with this one. The intelligence of the global brain is collective or distributed. And the next one, the system is usually said to have self-organizing emergent behaviors between its components. Yes, of course, right? And one interesting one is, the recursive self-improving algorithms that Nick Bostrom talked about, as being a real key instrument in the generation of ever more intelligent systems. I mean, the system will sculpt itself, which, gives rise to all kinds of interesting properties. Okay, so here's the argument then, because you're probably wondering how this all comes together. So, the idea then is we have this hyperintelligence in the near future, and there's a global brain in which one or more savant or even superintelligent systems has an extensive cloud presence, something like a global Google brain. It includes or cooperates with all the many leading apps and search engines. And then now I want to get to the nodes premise. It says that people, you and I, become nodes in a system by wiring into the cloud hyperintelligence. So either we are neural linked in, if you will, or we are there by having a wearable, say like, a wristband that detects our motion, as Facebook has right now in beta testing, for example, detects motion initiation in the brain, even if you don't move. So you could have a smart body in the future that you use on the metaverse, in the context of an Oculus system, for example. And unknowingly are feeding information into one or more global brain system. You're part of a larger intelligence, which I think is interesting from a philosophy of mind standpoint. And from an epistemological standpoint, it seems to raise issues of epistemic externalism about knowledge as well, which I think is interesting. And then of course, there's the extended mind issues as well. Okay, so the nodes premise. So the idea then is that we would be wired into the cloud hyperintelligence. An example would be a future metaverse. Oh God, I don't know how many of you saw Zuckerberg's YouTube video. Oh, I thought it was gonna just throw up. Like 2 minutes in, I was like, I need a drink. Right. And the sad thing is, like, I'm in Florida now. I'm like literally 30 minutes from Miami, and all my students are going over to all these metaverse meetups. I mean, it's like a tech hub in Miami right now. And, people are developing cryptocurrencies and they're making these platforms. I mean, I have grad students like, starting companies, and there's all this hype on the metaverse, and people think it's going to be a platform for internet freedom. And I know what's going to happen. One or more tech companies are going to just keep hiring and purchasing all of the smaller companies and just eat everybody up and ruin the party. And it's going to be just like a Zuckerberg nightmare. So anyway, what's a node? Well, a node is from a metaphysics standpoint, a concrete particular that provides sensory inputs or computes a function for the hyperintelligence. So a brain, a microchip, a person, a computer, and so on. I think we'll be wired in some fashion, but it's too early to tell whether the sensors will be physically embedded in the brain or just external wearables. But let's talk trends. So I imagine your group, knows about, Elon Musk's work, for example, over at Neuralink. I mean, he's been, influential in suggesting, to quote him, that we should have some sort of merger of biological intelligence and machine intelligence. And to that end, he founded Neuralink with the eventual implantable chip allowing data from your brain to travel wirelessly to your digital devices. Of course, governments, defense departments are doing all kinds of work on this. This is, the next big wave. We all know it. There's an artificial hippocampus. It's really cool. Ted Berger over at USC is now in phase 2 clinical trials with success in humans. So that's exciting. I mean, the real excitement here is what it can do for individuals who are disabled, what these kind of technologies will do. But I mean, once you have a neuroprosthetic, it also can be utilized as an enhancement. Of course, there are a lot of ethical issues here. I read a lot of science fiction, as you can probably tell. And, cyberpunk has long depicted situations in which, people have brain chips and they lose control over them. And their thoughts are sold to what I call the thought data economy. And I think the next big wave of data grabbing, that's going to be unregulated will be neural data. And, I've been working with the US Congress for this reason to try to prevent the nightmare. But, it is a deep concern of mine, especially given that the smarter AI gets, the less we're needed to be employable. And so to keep up with that, people will need to connect. So there'll be, there may be a kind of implicit requirement that people have to get brain implants. So we need to just make sure that this is safe. And we also have to worry about authoritarian governments that use such technologies to track their dissidents and control their populations. Okay, so in a different vein, non-invasive wearable technology is less medically risky and safer in a lot of ways, and it will come sooner, but it can also track us. But that commoditization of your biometric data has already started. I mean, look at ancestry.com, look at Fitbit. So I call this the thought data economy as it gets more and more in the head. And an example of that is the wristband that Facebook has right now that connects from the motor. What it does is it detects signals from the motor strip of the brain. And all you have to do is think that you want to move your hand and it moves the avatar on the screen. You don't have to actually move your hand. Okay, so, you know, I kind of already went into this, but I mean, there's reason why people would want to provide their thought data, even if it's stupidity, due to stupidity on their part or due to coercion. But I think you have an idea of some of the reasons that people may do this. I mean, they may simply be forced to, or they may be buying in, you know, to social media, or they may need a job, or they may want to be smarter, perform better at their jobs or in college. Or they may just want to sculpt their minds in what, you know, in the neuroethics community, we call cosmetic neurology, right? Okay, so that's kind of the global brain argument. So the conclusion is that, you know, we will become part of a global brain, but that's sort of only the beginning of the story in a way, because what you really want to think about is what it means. Will it be good? Will it be bad? And what should we do about it? And that's where we get to reactions, but let me check the time. Let's see, how long have I been going?
About 40 minutes, but please go ahead. I mean,
well, I'll just, you know, let me just go real fast to kind of wind this up. So obviously the impact of all of this is quite uncertain. And, you know, it's difficult to predict history. Yeah, I mean, predict the future. I mean, when you look at history, you can see how, you know, it's a very complex system where the presence of one individual can change the world. I mean, think of Hitler, for example. So it's hard to predict. And that's why I don't really, you know, like long-termism, by the way. But I think, though, that one thing that's interesting here is that AI regulations could be absolutely key to the future of the mind, because the regulations themselves, like the constraints that governments place on the implementation of wearable technologies and invasive technologies and data collection, turn out to be evolutionary constraints on AI systems. I think that's so interesting. So intelligent systems that are biological evolved by Darwinian evolution. So we know what those principles are. We've studied, you know, humans have studied that for a long time. It's interesting to kind of think strategically, what are the evolutionary constraints on what really is intelligent design in a way? I mean, it's a kind of evolution too, like some people call it radical evolution. I mean, and really the principles at work here have to do with AI regulations, market forces, you know, government incentives to track populations. I mean, things that you just wouldn't think about normally if you're studying evolutionary theory, for example. So that's kind of cool. And I think how these constraints operate and what we do to actually write AI legislation, for example, actually changes the shape of future intelligent systems. And so that's kind of cool. You know, it's like if you actually get the word out about the issues and write theoretical papers about it, you can actually shape the future of intelligence. Okay, so let's see. You might wonder if a global brain would be conscious. I'm happy to talk about that in Q&A. You know, but the techno-optimists, yeah, that's their platform. I mean, they think, you know, people like Ray Kurzweil, that if you build a sufficiently intelligent and complex system, it will inevitably be, you know, a hyperconscious system, which will achieve sort of a better level of consciousness than humans. But I see no reason to believe that, you know, algorithms akin to, you know, a sophisticated web-based system would also instantiate consciousness. I see no reason for that. I see no evidence. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop here, although obviously there's a lot I could say. So, you might ask if a global brain would be anything like a mind, for example. Okay, anyway, I'm going to stop here.
All right, thank you very much, Susan. Okay, well, we have plenty of time for Q&As, and why don't we start? So if you have a question, just write in the chat, Q or hand, whatever you like, and if you have a follow-up, just write F or finger, as we usually do here. So just please go ahead.
I think chat's currently disabled.
Oh,
I was
so
like,
Alo,
questions.
Alo, can you please help out with this? I am not the host. Maybe Susan, can you? Because I'm not. I was not made the host.
Well, I think everyone can speak, but everyone can disable the mute, so you can just speak when you have any questions.
No, but I would like to. Okay. Okay. Now,
So now I was able to chat.
Alo, can you let everyone? Can you allow everyone write on the chat, please?
Yes, actually, everyone can speak.
What about type in the chat?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
I still
It
can't.
says chat. It says chat disabled to me.
It just
Okay,
sort
so I think it's worked now.
Okay, now it works. Okay, so please write a question or hand, and if you have any new question, and then I will. Okay, so let's start with Adam.
Hello, thanks very much for the talk. Really stimulating set of issues. Yeah, so I guess a question I had is about the node hypothesis. And I guess the broader question is just kind of, what exactly would it take for human beings to be like nodes of this system? So I take it there's a kind of like mereological idea there that was behind your kind of initial worry, like we're going to be part of this system. But on at least one interpretation of what a lot of those sorts of devices like wearables do, they just gather information about us. And then it doesn't immediately seem to follow from that we would thereby be a part of the computational system, or at least it's not totally obvious that we would be. Like maybe the wearable that I'm wearing is a node of this global brain, but I'm not. It's just on my wrist. It's getting information from me, but in the same way that like if we had cameras set up somewhere looking at something that was hooked up into the global brain, the camera would be part of the global brain. It would be a node in it, arguably. But the things that the camera was looking at, like if it's a traffic camera looking at cars, the cars as they're driving by wouldn't suddenly become nodes of the digital system. So why wouldn't like a wearable or even some sorts of neural implants just be more like cameras in this sense, where there are transducers that are themselves nodes in the digital brain, but the thing they're pointing at, namely me, isn't really a part of the system, even though it is getting information about me. So it's not wholly innocent, but I'm not. But why should that make me worried that I suddenly become a part of this digital brain?
So yeah, this is like funny because I have to apologize because I haven't had a lot of time to sit down and write the paper. And I gotta say, so I was probably thinking two things. Okay, so I was probably thinking of layers in a connectionist or deep learning network, and the units as nodes, right? And so I was thinking that any kind of concrete particular in the world is something like a computational device, a device that computes a function and delivers the information, to subsequent nodes in the network. So I think I was thinking that, but I also think I was being a metaphysician and running that together with issues in the metaphysics of substance. So I was thinking, okay, if you look at like theories of substance, there's either a bundle theory or a substratum theory. These are like the leading theories. Well, there's other theories of substance as well, but I mean, those are two that I think have historically been very influential. And on both of those views, substances are basically constituted by their properties, among other things, in the case of the substratum view. So I was thinking that those properties would serve to individuate the global brain, and that those were properties that we instantiated, right? But that line of thinking would not mean that we were literally nodes. There would have to be a more careful formulation, which I'll do when I write the paper, because I think that means I'm basically thinking of two separate issues here. One is the sort of machine learning node perspective, and the other is the perspective of substance individuation and metaphysics. Does that help at all?
I think so. I guess, yeah, and I guess my question was more about the substance individuation issue. Yeah, there's kind of like an ontology of like when we become cyborgs, basically. Like if you're wearing a smartwatch, does that make you a cyborg? Can we probably, or are you still just like a human being? Like we would want to say you're part of this global brain just because you're wearing a Fitbit. But like if there's some Neuralink chip in your brain that like suddenly is like doing half of all of the stuff that's going on in your mind, well, now it seems like you and that digital thing might become some kind of substance or some kind of unity, or however we want to talk about it metaphysically.
Yeah, totally. And that's what I'm kind of writing about. You know, I have some work I've been doing on the extended mind, and I think like the early examples of the extended mind that people like Chalmers and Clark focused on were just, to me, not compelling at all, right? And even a smartphone, not compelling, but drop down compelling, you know, is the presence of, you know, a highly integrated brain chip. And, you know, you might say, well, is that extension of the mind? I mean, well, if it's in the head, you might say yes, or you might say no. You could fight about it, but it sort of doesn't matter, because you could also think of a case in which the chip is outside of the head, right? I mean, Ted Berger's hippocampus is outside of the head for the patients. So what's going on there is sufficient causal integration, right? Feedback. I mean, not necessarily in the case of today's technology in the hippocampus, but in terms of tomorrow's technology. So now what's going on in that case in terms of the metaphysics of mind, right, is really, really interesting, because it could be that you and I, oh, sorry about the barking. Sorry. Oh God, it's starting. I'm sorry. You and I could share a chip. And what does that mean? I mean, do we have a single mind? You know, there's a craniopagus twin case that is basically that. They have a shared thalamus. They have what's called a thalamic bridge. It's a novel, never before seen structure that links together their thalamuses or thalami, whatever. I don't know if it's plural or singular. I don't know how many of you have heard of those twins, but it's pretty cool philosophically. I mean, not cool for them, but I mean, they're because they're conjoined, they actually, the way they're conjoined, they can't see each other. But when one eats peanut butter, the other one tastes it. So they literally share qualia. So much for privacy of qualia. So anyway, what does all this say about the mind? I mean, are we, you know, are we all just not just natural born cyborgs, but natural born Borgs? Are we, you know, naturally integrated beings? What's our nature exactly? I mean, I think some of this gets particularly interesting if you think about extended consciousness and whether that's possible too. So anyway, lots there to think about.
James, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just real quick. So I had a similar question to Adam in terms of nodes. And I was originally thinking of it in terms of like a Google Glass or something like that, where like, and that's pretty related to Adam's example of like the camera. But I think, I mean, just an idea is that part of it might be that it's, you call them sensory transducers. So I would be more inclined to think that the sensory part, that really is me, as opposed to just having a camera of my, you know, goings on. But when it's a sensory transducer, I think that's new information that like into me, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, and I think if it's something that's actually a chip, that's not merely a sensory transducer, it becomes a better case, right? A stronger case of it actually being part of my cognitive system, right? But then you get into the ethics of ownership of ideas, and you know, I've always been meaning to write a paper called "My Chip Made Me Do It," in, you know, to kind of consider, you know, things which will, you know, sadly probably happen, you know, where a government or Google or whatever tweaks the content of your chip and could actually cause an action that, you know, you're confused by perhaps, or perhaps you even believe you initiated it, but you really didn't. And, you know, not only is it perplexing from the vantage point of free will, but it's also, I think, suggestive about what constitutes the mind. If something, is that chip part of the mind or not, when it's working against you? I mean, we don't, you know, the contents of our minds are not transparent to us in any case, and our minds often work against us. Well, I should say cognitive system here, to, you know, not run together, you know, cognition or perception and this metaphysics expression of mindedness. But
Herman.
you're muted.
Hey, I know, I got it now. Thank you for your talk. I think, yeah, you've been starting to answer some part of the question I had. So I wanted to ask you a bit about just the connection between brain talk and mind talk. And I guess in the last reply, you were going a little bit back and forth between brain and mind. And it maybe one way to start thinking is, so for those of us who were convinced by the extended mind thesis in the original Clark and Chalmers paper, it was already there towards the end. They get more crazy than at the beginning. At the beginning is like the little iPhone thing, but then they start talking about networks of people and big collections of humans and their technology as being part of my extended mind. And so one way to think about what you were describing, and I'm just curious if you're willing to go along with this, is that it's a version of that view where there's this very big technological network that includes both physical objects and humans and their brains and so on are connected together in one mind. So that seemed to pattern a little bit with some of what you were saying, but it's more mind talk than brain talk. And then there's another element to the Chalmers-Clark view that you didn't really talk about, which is it goes in the other direction too. That's, if we think of it like that, then one way to think of it is as an enhancement of me. It's not just I'm a little, you know, tool for the big thing, but the big thing on that view, if you're sympathetic towards it, I guess on the most radical view, becomes a part of me. And so it enhances my cognitive abilities. That wasn't really a question. That was more like, have you thought about those connections?
Yeah. I think that there's an unexplored area here of what I call hybrid intelligence. That was actually one of the slides that I didn't get to. And, you know, that really one of the interesting things about the global brain is the connection between an individual and that greater intelligence. I mean, we may be a metaphysical part. It really depends on the details. You know, and there's probably a better way to put it. But there's also an element of how that hybrid intelligence operates and to what extent it informs the nature of our minds. Yeah, and I sort of need to think about all of that. But I was working on this some months ago too, so it's not as fresh in my mind as I'd like it to be. But I mean, the kind of literature that would be interesting there would be like, there's this book by Thomas Malone, Superorganism, for example, like work on collective intelligence and stuff like that, I think would be really fun to look into. Yeah, and it's funny because until I started thinking about brain chips, I never bought into the Chalmers-Clark stuff. And it was only the brain chip thing, which for me turned out to be really definitive. And then the deepest question here, I think, is actually one of machine consciousness. So say we start replacing parts of our brain with chips, would we be able to even replace parts of the brain that underlie conscious experience? It's not at all clear we would, because we don't even know if machine consciousness is possible. So, to me, what is a mind? I mean, I think a necessary condition on something being minded is that it is conscious at least part of the time, even if it's just kind of a smidgen of its mental processing. So, would that World Wide Web intelligence even be minded? I don't know. I mean, I call it a global brain, but not a mind. And what would the relationship be between our minds and it? I think that part of the answer to that has to do with whether that thing is actually a conscious system as well. And you get into like some really cool issues about how you individuate systems. I mean, you can classify things however you want, right? But I mean, is there a metaphysical rule of thumb here, a principled reason to demarcate a system in a certain way? Yeah, I could tell I need to write this book. These are all these questions I'm asking, but I haven't answered them because I got too busy.
Just quickly, I think I was just about to follow up on that. The thing about consciousness seems really, really crucial. And at least, pre-theoretically, I think we're really confident that we're conscious, and incredibly insecure that the bigger thing is conscious. So that's a little bit of an argument for thinking that if there's something minded there, and if mind requires some level of consciousness or awareness, then we're the ones who have the minds, and that the bigger thing is just an extension of us rather than us being part of some other thing, because it's not conscious, so it's not even a mind. So I think we have some kind of initial priority here.
But is it an extension of us because it's smarter than us and does so much more than us? I mean, at best, we're just input units into it. I mean,
yeah, but we can use it, remember? Like it doesn't have any design, it doesn't have all the sort of stuff that, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Because, I mean, we won't even be able to follow its computations.
That's true about calculators.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what would the relationship be between humans and superintelligences? I mean, we just don't know, right?
Yeah, I agree. No, this is just a range of open questions.
I mean, will we lose control of it? And I mean, will we even know it exists? I mean, the thing that really freaks me out is that, most of the individuals who are nodes or, are somehow their data is being inputted into these systems may not even know that such systems exist and may not even know what is happening with their data.
Right. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a very quick follow-up on this, since we are just a very, very quick question. So when you talk about consciousness, you have in mind phenomenal consciousness, not just second order thoughts about first. It's just qualia and phenomenal stuff or self-awareness. Is it?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, I don't even know that, the kind of global brain that I'm talking about would have a functional consciousness. I mean, that would be like if we had access to the structure of the global brain, it wouldn't be hard to find out, at least if it was an early superintelligence or a savant system. Because I mean, we could look for correlates, like neural correlates, if you will. I mean, there are a lot of AI projects that are doing that right now. People in my center have been doing it right and left.
Right.
Yeah, that's all they're interested in because they think that's the kind of the royal route to intelligence.
Peter, next question.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for the talk. So I had a question of clarification about the main argument, the global brain argument. I guess I just wanted to get clearer about how strongly you intend us to take the conclusion, or it may be better to say what the strength of the conclusion is supposed to be. And I think it's a question about modality, the modality of the claim. I mean, are you aiming for saying that we will be parts of a global brain? Are you saying that we could easily be parts of a global brain? Are you saying it's a live possibility? Are you saying it's something that's likely? And I guess the question kind of goes back then to the premises too, because I wasn't quite sure how strongly you wanted us to take the premises too, in the same way, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. So I'm not saying it's metaphysically necessary. I'm saying it's technologically possible. It's compatible with the laws of nature, and that it's likely to happen. I think that's how I would put it.
Okay, so it's a question of likelihood, something like that.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I see. So and then the basic justification for the premises is something like you're noticing certain trends and you're projecting them into the future, and that makes it likely that they're going to go in a certain path, something like that. Is that fair?
Yeah. Is that okay, or is that does that strike you as a bad plan? Sorry about the dog. I'm watching my daughter's dog. She just hopped an airplane and stuck me with this giant puppy. It's like this big. So.
Yeah, no, that sounds fine. I mean, I guess I just wanted to know if, well, the way it's framed, it sounds like these are will claims. That's the thing. There's no modalities to soften the blow, so as it were. So maybe that could be clearer, I suppose. But I guess I just wanted to be clear about whether you were saying something really strong, or if this was just going to be a mere thought experiment for trying to understand the nature of consciousness and the mind and so on, which is a lot of the stuff you're interested in, or if you think this is something we should be planning for. And
Yeah,
it sounds like it's the middle thing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Lately, I care a lot more about all the dangers that we face rather than what I really love, which is metaphysics. So, I mean, you're an existential risk group, so I guess you all care about this too. Right. And so, my strategy is to warn people about the situation we may likely face.
Okay, thanks. That helps.
Yeah.
All right. So do we have other questions? So please write them down. Otherwise, well, in the meantime, I will ask something about long-termism. You mentioned it actually, but right. And well, you just mentioned it, and you said that you don't buy it, or you. Sorry, I missed what you said about long-termism at some point.
Oh, I was just complaining about. We can't predict the next 10 years. So I think it's ridiculous to sit there and fixate on brain uploading and these possible futures, which are so, I mean, for one thing, they're not likely anyway. If you look at the details of what uploading, I mean, I have argued that uploading wouldn't even be a form of survival. But on top of that, I mean, you know, even what we know right now about the brain suggests that uploading would be extremely difficult very far into the future. By the time we got to that point, the future would be radically different than anything we can envision now, right? So, I mean, it's probably a good idea to focus on the next 30 years and just getting to our technological maturity. Like what we do within the next 30 years, I think is definitive. I mean, just because we're at a point, as you know, where we face such incredible risk. I'm sure that you know a lot more about this issue than I do. You all lose a lot of sleep over this stuff. So.
All right. Thanks. Well, I do agree, at least in part, with what you just said. So James.
Thanks again for the talk. So I don't have the slides, but I wrote down at one point, kind of hooked us with the idea that we would be part of the global brain without knowing it, or there would be a chance of that. But then later on, it seemed like it would be, I mean, we would pretty well know if we had a chip inserted in our head or something like that. So just wondering where the without us knowing it part sort of came from.
Well, we could know we had a chip, or we might not, right? Hopefully we know it, but that doesn't mean that we know that there's a larger intelligence that our chip is giving information to. Right? I mean, we use the internet right now all the time, and there may be a global brain there for all we know, but we just wouldn't know it.
I see.
Yeah. So, hey, I was going to ask you all, what sort of projects are you doing at your institute?
Well, we have, I'll answer to this and then we go on to another question. So what are we doing? Well, you know, we just launched the institute. So at least now we are in the process still of recruiting people. So from next year, we will have a bigger team, and we will subdivide it into teams. But for example, I am working on more foundational issues, why it matters that humanity does not go extinct and what it means survival. So I'm also interested in what you were talking about, whether uploading, for example, is a form of survival, and what is the value of consciousness and all these related issues. But other people, for example, James works on well-being and population ethics. Faye works on the ethics of risk imposition, and she also works on the psychology of risk perception. Jesse works on luck, and well, if you're lucky, some of the bad things will happen. The bad of some of the existential and the connection between risk and luck. And Peter also works on issues related to the foundation of AI. His works more in logic and semantics, philosophy of language, philosophical logic. But from next year, we will have many other people joining us. Some people work in.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations! It's really good to know about your institute. That's amazing. Yeah, thanks. And it's good that it'll be in Hong Kong.
Yes. We one of our purposes was indeed that of having, I like how somehow the Caesar in Cambridge or the Future of Humanity Institute in Oxford, the Global Priority Institute in Oxford. Yeah. My idea is to have something like that, of course, in a smaller scale, given our university, but in a smaller scale, something like that in Asia. So, because I think that, many existential risks, without mentioning what, but let's say some existential risks could be, could emerge also because of global competition that can be understood in different ways.
quite worried about that. I mean, I'm in
Yeah.
Washington. I advise Congress. You know, I just gave a talk on the ethics of the metaverse to Congress. You know, and you know, everybody's worried about China and Russia, and
Yeah.
you know, it just causes this whole AI arms race.
Yes.
And you know, the perceptions are key here, and
Yeah.
so, and that's why it's really important to be philosophers warning people.
Yeah,
I mean, thing's a nightmare.
Yeah, I was about to ask you, in fact, what is or what are some of the most unsettling or worrying developments that you are seeing now in AI in connection with the mind?
Well, that's one. I mean, but I mean, you know, we forget the way social media as it stands today actually manipulates the minds of people.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, so sorry, when you were talking also about, you know, taking control of us or telling us what to do, I was thinking, well, in some ways, it's what happens in some places where, in a way, people are strongly suggested what to do by feeding them with some kind of information rather than others. So
Yeah.
perhaps it's just a matter of degree of an amplification of what is happening in some places, in epistemic bubbles or something like that.
I mean, intelligence specialists know very well that you can use Facebook or you know, some other social media account to manipulate people politically and cause turmoil in a country. And you know, social media wars are going on right now, and you know, tomorrow it will be these kinds of things, but with the use of wearables that are even more invasive than, you know, what we have right now, and maybe brain chips. I mean, that's pretty bad. I mean, you know, but biological weapons by far scare me the most of anything, right? I mean, future pandemics and, you know, and all this stuff becomes a reason to justify a global censor system. And so once you have those in play, you also have the possibility for these global brains. Yeah. So, you know, AI itself, I mean, I'm sure you've heard this before, it's not inherently dangerous in and of itself. It's a tool. It depends on how we use it.
Yeah,
right?
But it's just looking at the track record of the ways in which technology has been used by
I know.
the humans, I am not very optimistic. But anyway, so Rachel has a question.
Hi there. So I was wondering if you could say a bit more just about what you thought we could do practically about, you know, the dangers of the global brain. Is it like a matter of like what would we do to prevent like catastrophe? Is it that we have to like silo AI systems? Do we do something to the cloud? Do we have to regulate like the interface between us and those systems?
Well, I'm keenly interested in AI safety. While everybody around me is like giving up, right? They're just like, oh, fuck. It's so bad. The tech companies are so greedy. They won't implement anything. But I mean, I wonder if doing some research on consciousness could be useful. You know, something I was just thinking about. I was thinking about doing a grant on this, you know, because if you think about why are we careful about how we treat non-human animals, it's because we're conscious and we know they're conscious. It's that we can feel something, right? That gives us the capacity to have genuine empathy and protect non-human animals to the extent that we do. I mean, many humans don't care, but I mean, similarly, it could be that endowing AI with phenomenal consciousness, not just functional consciousness, to have that felt quality could make for safer AI systems. On the other hand, an over-emotional AI system could be like a teenager in the throes of hormones, right? So I was thinking about doing some research on that, on machine consciousness. I've developed some tests for conscious machines. I've like a patent with Princeton that we're putting through on a test and whatnot. But yeah, it's tricky because, you know, all of the solutions seem really naive, probably mine too, you know. I mean, it's pretty horrendous, especially if you think about the savant system issue, you know. But it may be that the AIs don't develop anything like intentions or goals or emotions in any way that is unmanageable. And it's just an excellent weapon in the hands of, you know, a government.
And so is that, are you thinking that the consciousness stuff has to do, or like the empathy stuff has to do with what people call the alignment issue? Is it sort of a version of that? Yeah,
it could be that it keeps an alignment in the, at least in the sense that almost like a parent, you know, or a pet owner, where the AI is the parent or pet owner. I mean, they may have no interest in us, sort of akin to how we feel, you know, about a random squirrel, but nevertheless, they respect our sentience. That's the hope. I mean, you know, it's something I kind of have been thinking about. I mean, I'm sort of out of ideas when it comes to AI safety and other ways, because, you know, it's like you can just hope for the best, but I mean, you know, why think that the system's going to maintain the path you put it on? I mean, I see no reason to think that, you know, just because it will be a self-improving machine.
And so,
yeah, I don't know. Do you have any ideas?
So I'm wondering about like the patent route, because I mean, it seems like you have access to both the government route and the commercial route to try and sort of remedy these things. I'm wondering if you think like there's different roles here, or one should be prioritized, or.
Well, the patent's useless. I mean, it's kind of fun to talk about, like, you know, like patenting a philosophy test for AI consciousness is hilarious to, like, you know, be in business talks with Princeton about it. But seriously, like, you know, that I would not recommend. I mean, bitching in Washington and bitching to the media, that helped. Because, you know, and getting the media to not be, I mean, you know, sorry, it's late at night, so, you know, I'm getting kind of rude. But getting, if anything you can do to make reporters less stupid in what they say. I mean, you know, this is just my sort of tales from North America, and having, you know, spent 2 years in Washington. You know, anything you can do to just influence public opinion. I mean, members of Congress read this crap in the media. And, you know, and the CEOs, the corporate CEOs they're transhumanists. Like the tech CEOs. So there's this dogma now that I hear over and over again. It's like this kind of Elon Musk style vision of the future. And it's become like pop philosophy, which, you know, I'm no fan of it. I mean, if you look at like the ideas, you know, it's not clear you could merge with artificial intelligence. I mean, it's the kind of stuff I said in my book. Or even, you know, if you're curious, you know, I wrote, writing op-eds helps. You know, I wrote op-eds to the Financial Times on this and the New York Times. I mean, if you look at the arguments that they make, I mean, so these transhumanists are saying things like, you know, replace the brain with chips, right? But if you do that, I mean, most people will actually agree that if you destroy their brain, they would die. Even if you believe in the soul, your earthly existence would be done, right? I mean, it's a sort of default materialism, if you will, that, you know, the brain is the seat of well-functioning consciousness. So, you know, if you look at these like tech gurus, I mean, like Elon Musk, I mean, and Ray Kurzweil, I mean, they're sort of thinking about replacing the brain piecemeal with chips and then eventually going on to the cloud and uploading and all this, I mean, you'd be dead on almost every conception, even like a religious conception, right? I mean, your soul would still exist, but your earthly existence would be done. So, I mean, I'm sort of confused about like these views that I'm actually encountering constantly. I don't get it. I mean, there could be reasons to upload, but your own survival shouldn't be one. And we don't know that you could have a sort of uploaded culture or anything like that, because there wouldn't be any conscious beings in it if machines can't be conscious. We don't know. We don't even know what the substrate is for these chips. Why think that these chips could actually instantiate consciousness? I mean, we don't know what consciousness is in the brain. Like there's still debates about where it's located. It's just my 2 cents, right?
Thank you.
It's just my rant, my late night rant over here. Sorry about that.
Great.
You can tell I'm a little fed up.
Well, we don't want to keep you up too late. So do we have, if we don't have other questions, maybe raise hand. Okay, Alexandra, please unmute yourself and have one more question.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for your talk. Well, I also don't want to keep you up too late, but let me just raise maybe a brief conceptual request for conceptual clarification. So, because at the start of your talk, you mentioned this idea of an AI system with savant abilities as opposed to an AGI. And I'd like, if I may, ask you to say more about this idea. So for instance, how would you contrast this notion with that of a narrow intelligence, a narrow AI, or maybe a narrow superintelligence? Is it that an AI system with savant-like abilities is a form of narrow superintelligence, but it differs from it in that a narrow superintelligence can only do one thing extremely well, whereas the savant-like system can do many other things, but it does one thing very, very well and does lots of other things poorly. Would that be the difference? And just, if I may follow up on that, you also mentioned you're not looking at the traditional argument of which seems to be based on recursive self-improvement. System improves itself and gets better at improving itself, becomes more intelligent, which allows it to become even more intelligent and so on. That's kind of the traditional concern about superintelligence. You're looking at a different route. So my question is, does the property of being a savant-like AI system preclude recursive self-improvement? So for instance, one might wonder, yeah, if the savant-like ability is about engineering, could that still lead to this traditional concern about how you get to superintelligence?
Yeah, no, thanks. That's a good question. So I think a savant system could have recursive self-improvement algorithms. It will. And that it could get from a savant system to a superintelligent system without ever hitting anything that's functionally isomorphic to a human, because it will already at the savant level exceed us in so many ways that it won't be a functional isomorphism. You know, it won't be like us. It will be better than us in so many ways, even when it's a savant system. So it will be an expert at, say, playing Go or, you know, all kinds of other capacities. It will be a savant system, you know, it could be a savant system in all sorts of ways. It could have crazy deficits relative to us. The early savant systems would, and then gradually become better and better in a variety of ways. I defined savant systems roughly in an interview with Scientific American that's on the internet. So, you know, you can look at that there. I don't know if I answered all your questions though. But I was thinking that something could go from being a savant system to a super intelligent system with recursive self-improvement algorithms.
Okay, that's
helpful. I mean, why would it care about being functionally isomorphic to us? It wouldn't be like, oh, I want to be a functional isomorph, so I think I'll get rid of my capacity to beat every human at Go. Because I just want to be functionally isomorphic. Oh, and you asked about narrow.
Right.
So by a narrow AI system, do you mean domain specific?
I assume that would be synonymous, but yeah, it's so often employed, the narrow versus general contrast. So I was wondering how the savant system notion were compared to this
general.
fitted.
So, a domain specific system would be a system that only excels in like a singular domain. We have like plenty of these right now. But I think if you look at GPT-3 and the further iterations, it has something that goes beyond just narrow AI already. I mean, the fact that, here I'm thinking, I was a student of Jerry Fodor, so I'm thinking of like, what's a central system? It's something that has the capacity to not just cross sensory divides, but also cross topic divides and integrate material, right? And I mean, to me, these transformer systems are capable of doing that in a real basic way. So for me, those are already beyond narrow AIs. Like, I think we're gradually moving to more and more general systems. And so these savant systems won't just be narrow, they're general.
I see.
I don't know, that's just my thinking.
Thanks, that's helpful.
All right, so it's almost 10 here, and I think it's almost 10 in Florida as well. So again, Susan, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thanks for having me. I want to invite y'all to some of our events in Florida, and we should keep in touch.
Oh, definitely, yes.
Yeah, I've just sort of been slowly building up this center, and hopefully we'll have some cool events. It sounds like we have very similar interests.
Indeed, yes. We will be very happy to do that.
Oh, it'd be great to collaborate. Yeah, and I wish you all the best with the center that you're creating. It sounds
Thanks.
great.
Thanks, likewise. So again, good night, and thanks again.
Thanks for having me. Nice
Thanks.
meeting you all. Okay,
Bye-bye.
all right, bye.